Wolfenstein is like this. Doom is like this. If the phrase "that walked so this could run" was most accurately attributed to one thing in the world, it would be applicable to Wolfenstein's relationship to Doom. Wolfenstein 3D was ID Software's first massive jump into the FPS genre after only having Hover Tank as a template. Wolfenstein 3D would go on to be hugely successful and inspiring ID to perfect this newfound genre. Kinda newfound. Like, there was stuff before it for sure. That's where Doom comes in. Doom's sales make Wolfenstein look like it flopped because Doom was installed on more PCs in the year 1995 than Windows 95. For a while, it was the most installed piece of software on computers. It was a big freaking deal.
Only he didn't use freaking.
But was that all it was? Doom was the first-person shooter that made everybody hop on board the FPS train. It even coined the FPS term, really, and defined what most 90s FPS games would be for the whole decade with its hit franchise. But all of that started from Wolfenstein. That game started everything. That game already revolutionized the FPS industry. And now the whole id Software team was just going to revolutionize the industry again with less than a year of active development on Doom? How are they going to do this? This isn't even possible. How could they redefine the FPS genre again? The team that created Wolfenstein, the first popular FPS game, they were just going to redefine a genre that they already defined? They caught lightning in a bottle with Wolfenstein. Lightning doesn't strike in the same spot twice, and Doom will just feel like an inevitable expansion of Wolfenstein. It'll be a short-lived spiritual successor that they'll hype up beyond belief before release. We've seen that all the time. A studio attempting to capture lightning in a bottle again. It never works. And we've seen that over and over and over again, and they did hype up Doom beyond belief. Beyond achievable expectations, to be honest. They did have less than a year of active development. They did claim that Doom, before even starting development, would be the most realistic and amazing piece of PC software ever developed. They said that before even starting development, that Doom would be Wolfenstein 3D times a million. What a bunch of idiots. What do you think I am, Yeah, I was actually wrong, because it is. Doom is the exception that proves the rule that lightning can't strike the same spot twice. Doom isn't just a spiritual sequel to Wolfenstein, no. Doom is its own beast. If Wolfenstein is a tornado, then Doom is a fucking hurricane because it was forced to be different from Wolfenstein. And Doom is not short-lived. Doom changed everything. Doom is eternal. And the developers went through hell to make it that way. You know how it's going to be. You're going to get some facts, some development history, my own personal speculation, and a review. Let's fly all the way back to 1992 or fly forward to 1992 if you watched my Wolfenstein video. The 90s. id Software released a major hit. Wolfenstein 3D. Everybody at the studio was trying to decide what their next project was going to be because they were finishing up an expansion for Wolfenstein called Spear of Destiny. The four co-founders of id Software, John Carmack, who created the engine for Wolfenstein, the engine for Doom, and Quake, John Romero, who's this lovely looking dude who was the primary programmer of Wolfenstein, Doom, and Quake, Adrian Carmack, who is not related to John Carmack by any means, but they just share the last name. He was the artist of the team, Adrian for an A for artist, a lot of A's, and then Tom Hall, who was the lead designer of id Software while they were all figuring out what their next game should be. 1990's 2 ending was coming around the corner quickly, and they were still all at each other's throats about deciding on this. Everyone could agree they wanted to do something new, except for Tom Hall. You'll notice a common theme here based on what I'm saying, is that the lead designer, Tom Hall, was like one of the liberals who gets brought on Fox News as the Five. His ideas are going to be immediately rejected, so he might as well just be Anakin trying to get on the Jedi Council. The company decided after tons of arguing it was going to be an FPS game again, but it was not going to be Wolfenstein. It was going to be a new IP with John Romero's one rule for that IP being,
if it looked like Wolfenstein, any room looked like Wolfenstein, you have failed.
And that type of resentment for Wolfenstein, I think, is partially because John Romero hated creating the level design for Wolfenstein 3D, but I also think it was because him and John Carmack wanted to make something new and distinct from Wolfenstein, specifically for John Carmack. He wanted the technology of video games to push boundaries, and that's how he wanted Doom to be recognized. He didn't want it to be paired up with Wolfenstein with just another coat of paint. John Carmack wanted it to look more realistic. Tom Hall wanted it to be more more story driven, and everyone else in between them both, everyone else in between that crossfire, just wanted a really fast-paced shooter that didn't focus on anything but speed and atmosphere.
And tearing down all those 90-degree walls that plagued first-person shooters before Doom 1.
They were all at each other's throats in these offices, but specifically at Tom Hall's throat because nobody was on his side of the fence. He was just kind of lonely and he felt like he was being ignored. The company in late 1992 was attempting to decipher what the name of this new IP was going to be. It was going to have demons, and it was going to be about a space marine. They received their inspirations from movies like Aliens and Evil Dead 2, which easily explains the super shotgun and the chainsaw.
Hail to the king, baby.
Oh wait, wrong IP. Oh wait,
Hail to the king, baby.
that's the right IP. The first name they had in mind for this new video game title was going to be Green and Pissed, referring to the green space marine main character being pissed off. Yeah, it wasn't very clever. It was very much like an 8th grade title, but it was better than their next title, which was going to be Attack of the Attackers. And I'm sorry that I planted that inside your head. That was an awful name. That was really terrible of me. I will, let's just fast forward to how they came up with the classic Doom title. One day, John Carmack was watching the Martin Scorsese film Color of Money, and then this line was spoken.
Doom.
That became the title. It did have a subtitle for a bit, Doom Evil Unleashed, but you get my drift. It eventually just became Doom down the line. We're already almost in the year 1993, the release year of Doom, and we haven't even begun active development yet. All we know is there's demons, we got ideas, we got concepts that had an atmosphere, we have John Carmack working on the engine, and the enemy gore and enemy violence that was going to be on par with Evil Dead. Tom Hall finished what was called the Doom Bible in November of 1992. This contained all the texture assets, story plot points, cutscene dialogue, and what the set pieces were going to be. The Doom Bible did have a hub system idea that utilized a monorail of some sort, which took you from level to level, which was similar to a game like Dead Space. There were terminals like in Doom 3 that you could interact with as well. Tom Hall presented all of that, presented all of this Doom Bible that was his own creation to the crew, and John Carmack threw it all out the fucking window. He hated it. And he says a plot in a video game is like the plot in a porno. Nobody wants to see it, everybody just wants the action. And the rest of the team, they kind of just agreed with him. They did develop one really cool shot straight from Tom Hall's Doom Bible, and it was that the game would start off with 4 Space Marines all playing cards at a table before they're under attack from these demons. And that's all the gameplay you're seeing right here. The game was just now beginning development, with the first piece of Doom media to hit the airwaves in January of 1993. And it was not any form of actual development updates. It was nothing, that people would actually want to see. It was just an ad. It was a press release that said Doom would be the most technologically advanced and greatest piece of software ever available to computers. It was going to be Wolfenstein times a million. That ad. They said all this before they really even started going into full-on active development. That's insanity. You can't say things like that before you've even started. They promised that it would have an online and 4-player support and have fully 3D environments. Remember these promises, by the way. They're gonna come back around and slap somebody in the face. Tom Hall came back to id Software with his revised Doom Bible. Here it is, guys. Here it is, and it was met with scrutiny again in 1993 during active development because they had technological limitations that kept them from making that hub world that players could traverse from level to level seamlessly. They just couldn't do it. They could not make it happen, so they completely told them to scrap that idea. And because John Romero felt like that all of Tom Hall's level design ideas looked way too similar to Wolfenstein 3D. The footage you're seeing right here is literally Tom Hall's visions, and they do look a little bit too similar to their already established IP, so I can see where John Romero is coming from. Tom was seeing a science fiction movie with demons being unleashed, which he was never fully interested in the first place, but he saw potential in making the story more interesting. John Romero didn't see any of that. All he saw was corridor after corridor of the same height hallways, the same width ceilings, and it looked all too similar to Wolfenstein 3D to ever be put into their new IP. Tom Hall, the lead designer, he was somewhat of the victim of the Doom creation story, but it's almost like his ambition got in the way of the progress of the game. He had ideas that were really ahead of its time, but that just didn't work out well with the team. John Carmack basically threw his Bible to the side and said, game with plot is like porn, sorry bro. And while I agree with the sentiment that John Carmack is saying in 1993, I think Tom Hall had ideas that were ahead of their time. Like games like Half-Life and Halo have tried to revolutionize these story-based ideas in FPS games, and Tom Hall was just trying to do the same, but way before it was ever popularized. He was trying to revolutionize gaming storytelling while John Carmack wanted to revolutionize the tech of gaming. There's even a quote that backs up what I'm saying from Tom Hall, where he said, and I quote, basically, Carmack is a technological genius, and you can't have a strong tech lead and a strong creative lead. You have to have focus. Doom chose tech, and they chose right. But that doesn't mean that Tom Hall wasn't right about something. That lead designer, he was right about something that many games have accomplished since then. Something that is more popular in FPS games than the tech revolution. It's that story-based revolution that has been popular since the early 2000s. Now let's take the spotlight a little bit off Tom Hall for a second, because John Romero, the lead programmer, and Adrian Carmack, the lead artist, also thought that John Carmack was being too ambitious because he wanted a world level where you'd seamlessly go from one area to the next, and he wanted that to be implemented in his new engine. Doesn't that sound kind of similar to Tom Hall's idea though? But John Carmack would never agree with Tom Hall. He even thought that the idea of flying enemies was dumb, but yet Caco demons and flying skullheads, they made the final cut of Doom. That was Tom Hall's idea. People thought that was stupid when he first brought that up. The traversing world concept that was slightly brought up by Tom Hall was even more brought up by John Carmack to be able to show off his new engine. They ended up compromising on what would become a transitioning level screen where you went from one area to the next, but it was basically just a GIF. It wasn't anything revolutionary. It was literally just a screen, like a splash screen that showed you go from one location to the next. It was not revolutionary. It was literally just a loading screen, basically. By the way, at this point in the beginning of 1993, something truly incredible happened to id Software. Fox, the movie studio, offered id Software the rights to make an Aliens game. This did not affect Doom whatsoever. They actually chose not to take the license within an hour of being offered. It came down to the creative limitations by using the Aliens IP because they were already working on demon designs that were being claymated by Adrian Carmack and Kevin Cloud. Aliens, the movie, there isn't any demons. So they said, game over, man. That ain't happening. Back to the main plot, the lead designer, Tom Hall, at this point in development was feeling isolated and felt that he was contributing nothing to this project, so he stopped showing up to work, except on rare occasions. He just stopped showing up. He felt like that he was doing nothing for the project. He felt like nobody wanted to hear what he was saying. And John Romero was at the office cracking down in the workplace because he felt that this game was not coming out the way it should. It all felt flat, and they realized that doing things that were three-dimensional, like walking down stairs, would even make the game freeze or crash, and they didn't know why. They were slowly finishing this product even though they were working like 80-hour work weeks. And everything to John Romero just looked too similar to Wolfenstein 3D. John Romero and John Carmack met up like divorced parents at a reunion to talk about what to do with Tom Hall because he was their lead designer and he wasn't showing up to work, and they didn't think he was contributing. They needed to find a replacement for him fast and fix the game in time for the end of the year release. John Carmack just wanted to straight up fire Tom Hall, and at first Romero resisted, but inevitably he caved in. Tom Hall was forced to resign in August of 1993, just 4 months before the game's release in December. Tom Hall would eventually go on to work for 3D Realms, where he'd be helping out with Duke Nukem 3D, and then he created a company with John Romero later on called Eon Storm, and that was the company that would eventually create the Deus Ex series. His philosophy of story-first video games would live on as being ahead of its time, and Tom Hall was ambitious. He wanted to push boundaries for what a video game could say, whereas it just didn't line up with John Carmack, who wanted to push the boundaries of what a video game could do. Tom Hall's vision didn't line up with this company, but his vision would inevitably land in his company Eon Storm, who would make Deus Ex and would become one of the pioneers of how storytelling can be told in a video game. But let's rewind a little bit. How did Doom effectively revolutionize the FPS genre all over again, as I said in the beginning? As John Carmack wanted it to be. We're not making money. were making history. What does that mean? What do they mean by that? Doom went from being a Wolfenstein clone to becoming one of the most technologically ahead of its time pieces of software in almost every way. But how did that happen? That's the dream that we're gonna see John Carmack fulfill. John Carmack saved up his own personal money for Steve Jobs' next computer. At the time, it was around $10,000, and with inflation, it would be well over $22,000, so you know that John Carmack was super invested in what the future of technology was going to be like. John's idea was that he was going to up the ante from Wolfenstein's 2D engine that was perceived to be 3D by creating an actual 3D world, just like how they promised in the ad of 1993. This was not possible. He already made this engine, but he was running into countless problems, specifically when running up and down stairs, clicking on buttons, and just the game running at a slow frame rate in general. You could not have a room on top of another room to make the game 3D. It was not possible. All the assets in the game had to be 2D, but that was gonna be with a catch. Technically a few catches. You see this? This is the second mission to Doom 1 when it was in early alpha stages around middle of 1993 before they could figure out ways to make it look different from Wolfenstein 3D. Doesn't it kind of look off to you, like just a little odd? Because here's the real version. Right off the bat, you can notice shadowing. Shadows were added into every single level to give the further illusion to the 3D environments. This would allow for players to feel like that textures actually had depth, and their shadows would be portrayed from light sources on the map. This was huge for Doom because there was hellish environments that needed that extra layer of atmosphere, and they wanted to separate it from Wolfenstein 3D where all the lighting is exactly the same and there is no shadows. People don't really talk about this when it comes up to the shadows, but Doom was actually kind of scary when it came out. It wasn't a horror game by any means, but let's just say you were playing it in 1993. You go into a room and you pick up a key for a door on the map. You pick up your blue key, all the lights shut off, you hear a door open behind you, and tons of demons are now rushing at you. That would have scared somebody when they were playing the game in 1993. Nowadays, nobody even thinks about it being a horror game because the horror genre has evolved so much. Nobody thinks that a change in lighting and a sound behind you would be the sole reason why you'd get jump scared and freak out. It wouldn't work nowadays. It's why as years go on, Doom was more heavily identified as an action game with no horror in it at all, rather than an action game with elements of horror like Doom 3. The lighting, the creatures, the dark corridors, the traps, and all of these elements create a horror atmosphere that had action gameplay which was strongly detached from its predecessor Wolfenstein 3D. The next factor for creating a unique look to Doom was going to change the game, literally and metaphorically. This was one brought up by John Romero when he realized that he could alter the sizes of textures and scale them in a room. He couldn't stack a room on top of another room, but John Carmack had created an engine where the height and width of ceilings and walls and floors could be changed drastically from Wolfenstein 3D, where every hallway looks exactly the same. This led to John Romero to play around with the sizes of these wall textures and create massive rooms with enemies that could be on platforms towering above you. Look at these technical changes to the environments with the shadows and the lighting that allowed for the game to not only look distinct, but now the size of the areas was altered so much that it doesn't even look like a Wolfenstein clone anymore. It just looks like Doom. One small problem. When you were outside in these open sandbox fields that Doom is known for, when you look up to the sky, you would see a black sky. But you're on Mars, right? So space. So, nothing's in the sky, it just looks like a black sky. Nothing wrong with that. Who cares? Wrong. John Romero didn't like the black sky, so he added skyboxes that look like they just came off of a Megadeth album. This created even more of an illusion of being stuck in the world of Doom, being stuck in hell on Mars. I kind of get that the black sky could have created more of a horror and ominous feeling, but the skyboxes that Romero made are just so fucking cool that it's hard for me to even say no to them. I mean, come on, they look amazing. They look so cool. Everything about these environments is just so enjoyable to explore due to the variability of the heights and the walls of the room and the floors, the outside areas, the secrets, the skyboxes, and the speed of it all. But that's not everything in design. What about the creatures? What about the guns? What about the models? That was done more so the same as Wolfenstein 3D, but with one other catch to that. Just another reason for me to believe that id Software was pouring their hearts out into this game. So previously, id Software would draw 2D pictures for every angle of a model. They would scan every picture, put all the pictures into one big model of an enemy. And this would give the illusion that because it was every angle of this model in 2D, that it was 3D. This time Adrian Carmack and Kevin Cloud, and they even hired a Hollywood artist named Don Ivan Punchance. He ended up creating the logo for Doom and the artwork. Don Ivan's Punchance son, though, his name was Gregor Punchance. He also ended up helping Adrian Carmack and Kevin Cloud with sculpting claymation models. That's right, they claymated stop motion models so they could convert them to 2D pictures. The model would be moving one frame at a time, and they could have more animation movement to these creatures. This might have also made it easier than drawing out a picture for every angle, but I'm not sure. They might have just been doing this just to be different, just to have fun. The creatures just in general have a beefier presence to them than the previous game. This was not uncommon in the gaming industry though, because even a game like TMNT's beat 'em up games of the 90s, they created CGI models of the turtles and then they would digitize them to a 2D video game. This created the same effect of 2D environments being all wrapped around one thing to create a 3D effect, which would later be dubbed as 2.5D, which was a term that was coined through Doom's illusions of 3D environments. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors here that make things just work in Doom. Now, you might believe they did the same thing for guns, like creating claymation models. No, they actually just ended up buying toy guns from the store and then they scanned them the same way that they scanned the claymation models. They bought Little Ralphie's Red Ryder rifle so that they could use it when shooting those demon apes. Wait, they're not apes. Sorry, I just got done watching Planet of the Apes the other day. Demon imps. Let me get into the tech jabber of all this. Now, I want to clarify the specifics of 2.5D. Basically, it was a term that was created to identify a game that used a bunch of 2D elements to create a 3D illusion. Now, with all that being said, if you put Doom in front of me, especially as I was growing up, and you asked me, is this a 3D game? I would have just said, yes, it is a 3D game. It's not because it is actually a 3D game, but it's because it sure as hell looks like one, let's be honest. And you probably have 1,000 questions popping up in your head, you know, oh, well, how is that not 3D? How is this wall not 3D? How is this cube not 3D? How whatever? I'm gonna be honest with you, I did an hour of research attempting to understand how they did this. I still don't get it. I will attempt to dumb it down as much as humanly possible, but it could also be perceived as butchering the topic, which, you know, whatever. Here we go. Time to butcher. John Carmack, when creating the Doom engine, was trying to find workarounds for the stairs, the teleporters, the button systems, and the fake 3D environments that their game would have to process. The processing was so difficult, even when all the environments became 2D, the game just wouldn't function at the frame rate that they needed the game to function at. Earlier in 1993, John Carmack was studying a methodology called binary space partitioning. I know that sounds like Latin to me too. Stick with me, I promise. Stick with me. This was being used by other companies that were not in the video game industry. So John Carmack was going to take this binary space partitioning and apply it to his Doom engine to make things work better. Now, what is binary space partitioning? I can throw you up this diagram and tell you that it splits up the environment into sections based on what you are currently looking at in the game to create illusions of 3D while also not having to process everything in the environment that's behind you or in the areas you're not looking at. Or I can just severely, and I mean severely, dumb it down for myself, to be honest. Whatever you're looking at is rendered. Whatever you are not looking at is not rendered.
It's how Doom can remain on a 2D plane while adding more and more to its environments, while making it look like you have the illusion of going upstairs and being above something else.
Thousands of games have used this, where what you're looking at is what is rendered and what's around you, behind you, is not rendered for you in your game personally.
Everything is split up. All the shapes are split up based on your particular viewpoint. So you can see from this diagram, based on what you're looking at, based on the direction that you're going on the map, the game is processing what to render first. It's rendering front to back. It's rendering the map based on your position, based on what you're looking at. And then as you move forward, let's say into this room into Doom, these pillars on the left and the right side, now they spawn in as you enter the room. And then when you exit the room and move on to the next area, they will de-render. They will not be there anymore. This allowed for the game to have a different appeal to it versus Wolfenstein, where all the walls are the same height, everything is on the same axis. You couldn't go upstairs, you couldn't go downstairs, you couldn't move to different floors, you couldn't go up elevators, you couldn't do any of that. This game allows for that to happen because it takes way less processing power to process what's in front of you from your viewpoint versus going through an entire level where it's trying to process everything at once.
And it can make Doom run smoothly with complicated features like stairs and buttons, which was John Carmack's issue with Doom. That even with all the 2D assets, even though he couldn't make it 3D, it was still running like crap, and this made it work. The first time they ever tested binary space partitioning was when they were porting Wolfenstein 3D to the Super Nintendo. And the reason why they were porting it over to the Super Nintendo is because they handed it off to a group of people and they didn't make progress with it for 9 months straight. id Software was in contract, and they had to do this in April of 1993, and they did it in 3 weeks using binary space partitioning. What they couldn't accomplish in 9 months, id Software did in 3 weeks due to John Carmack's new revolutionary engine idea. This is a revolutionary thing for the video game industry, and it's thanks to John Carmack and taking this practice and evolving it for video games. This is quite possibly one of the most important things to ever happen to video games. And even if I don't quite get it, even if I did butcher it, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't give it thanks. So we have seen the creation, the origins of Doom, the false hype that was created by the studio in the very beginning in January of 1993, the conflict with Tom Hall in the office using his Doom Bible and him resigning. And then now we've seen the revolutionary technological feats that changed everything, as this title suggests. Now, id Software in the summer of 1993 could walk downstairs, and now they could use teleporters. Doom changed everything, and that is no understatement. Now let's get closer to the release of Doom and everything it changed in its aftermath, and of course the review of Doom. Tom Hall was replaced as lead designer by a guy named Sandy Peterson, who worked on everything from Call of Cthulhu to Doom to Age of Empires. Him and John Romero split the burden of level designing, with Sandy focusing heavily on episodes 3 and 4 of the campaign, and Romero focusing heavily on episodes 1 and 2. People loved how fast-paced Sandy's levels were, but they also loved the atmosphere of Romero's levels. John Romero was far more focused on aesthetic, whereas Sandy was far more focused on making something intense and difficult and fast. I believe these work in tandem perfectly with each other because you start off the game with a low skill floor and get used to aspects of every part of the game. Episode 2 is just a little bit harder, but then there's a difficulty spike when going to episodes 3 and 4, but it literally just feels natural because you're already accustomed to the controls and everything to do and the environments and the aesthetic and the enemies that you are fighting by the end of episode 2 because you were eased into it. And that difficulty spike will hit you in episode 3 and even more in episode 4, but you're ready for it. The atmosphere was just such a great focus for the first 2 episodes, whereas the last 2 being more difficult and insane was that perfect juxtaposition. The most important thing to both of them, though, was that this did not feel like Wolfenstein anymore. And thank God for that, because we're only in the last month or 2 before the release of this game. Tom Hall was out on his own now. He went to go work underneath the publisher Apogee, and he actually got the license from id Software to make Wolfenstein 2. But then kind of id Software just took it back after they decided, well, we want to make our own IPs. Sorry, dude, we don't want anybody else doing that. I understand that you want your own creations to be yours. You want your own IPs to be yours. But this still proves why Tom Hall just constantly got the short end of the stick for the entire development period. Like, the dude has left the company at this point. He finally gets to make Wolfenstein 2, which is what he wanted to do in the first place, and literally gets sideswiped. They just take the IP right back from him and just say, nope, you're not doing it now, sorry. So even once he's already left, he's still the victim of this story. They gave it over to him and then just took it right back. They took most of the assets, though, that they were going to use for Wolfenstein 2 at Apogee, and then they created a game called Rise of the Triad instead, which, funny enough, is one of the better Doom clones out there. It's a really fun game. Also, it's pretty ironic that they wouldn't want anybody else making their sequels at id Software, because Wolfenstein 2 would eventually go on to be made by Grey Matter Studios underneath the title Return to the Castle of Wolfenstein. But back to id Software. The final days in the office were rough. Everyone was working around 100-hour work weeks. This should never be glorified, by the way, at all. The only positive is that I want to assume they were all paid overtime for doing this. See, none of this is okay. id Software was an extremely small company at that time, so you like to think that maybe these people were just thinking about it as a passion project and they wanted to be there as long as they were to try and get it out and make sure it was in the best condition possible. But it's kind of hard to say with a company like this. It's really small, so I give it the benefit of the doubt. But this is practices that companies have hundreds to even thousands of employees do to their employees, and you know they do it against their will. You know that they don't actually want to be there for an 80, 90, 100-hour work week. Adrian and Kevin thought John Romero was a pain in the ass to work with, and they even added him as an Easter egg into Doom 2, where John Romero's head was on a pike in the final mission of Doom 2. He was inside the Icon of Sen, which is the final boss of the game. You shoot rockets at the inside of the skull, so you're basically shooting rockets at John Romero's head on a pike. John Romero noticed this Easter egg a few days before release and decided in Doom 2 to add dialogue for the Icon of Sen where he said, "To win, you must destroy me, John Romero," and he completely distorted the audio so it doesn't actually sound like that, but that is what he's saying when you enter the final boss arena. So technically, the boss of Doom 2, the final boss, is John Romero's head, and you have to blow it up. We're at the 100-hour work weeks, the sleeping in the office days before release, and you remember how I said that they promised there'd be 4-player co-op support and online? Yeah, they didn't even start on that yet. We are a couple of weeks before release. We're at the end of November. The game releases on December 10th, and John Carmack was racing around creating network coding at the last minute. John Carmack, being the technical genius, was able to do it with his engine creation abilities and his coding forte. He had become the most important asset to id Software in their early career with Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. He wasn't the most likable, but he was vital to their company at the time, and that cannot be understated. This dude worked a 30-hour workday, literally the day before release of this game. John Romero, just a few weeks before the game released, was racing to switch out all the older items that were in the game that were earlier in development. He got rid of a 3 live system that they had in place and basically just said that the game should have unlimited lives because it's not a freaking arcade game. You play it on your computer, it's not an arcade game. All the menus were still being created in just the final couple of weeks, and all the co-founders were finishing up their duties while playing matches with each other at the same time to make sure that the network coding worked. John Romero wanted to come up with a name for a game mode that involved killing each other for points, killing each other's friends' players for points. The name came out to be, you guessed it, Deathmatch, which everyone has heard that term. Every Call of Duty you play, nearly every FPS game you play, Team Deathmatch. That all stemmed from Doom, and John Romero, who also created the slightly less popular term of fragging as well. Instead of kills, it was frags. He didn't want to call it kills. He said you get killed was lame. He said you got fragged is awesome. That's a cool new term. You were just fragged. And this is a more outdated term that's referenced in arena shooters, but it all stemmed from Doom as well. The release date was upon them. It was December 10th, 1993. They all knew the game was going to be great. John Carmack finished up the network coding. They fulfilled their promises to the public, even if the 2.5D was technically not 3D. They directly sold the game through id Software's website, and they offered the first episode for free on almost every shareware software available. This would mean that you could basically play a demo of the first episode on shareware on your computer, but you would go to id Software's website to buy the remaining 3 episodes. This also meant that unlike Wolfenstein, which was sold through Apogee, id Software would make all of the profits, and that would mean id would be swimming in cash. I cannot foreshadow this well enough. With the game originally releasing on a small scale with the University of Wyoming, over 10,000 people at this school tried downloading it at the same time, and the college university servers crashed. The game was literally banned from multiple colleges because of this fear of server crashing because of the popularity of a single game. That is a feat. Imagine studying for exams and the servers crash because of a fucking video game. It would go on to catch Microsoft's attention and they would want to buy Doom, but negotiations fell through. Doom eventually was just ported with Windows 95 after being installed more times as a software than Windows 95 in general in the year 1995, which is a feat that no other software in history has ever done. Doom did that in the year 1995. It out-installed Windows. Doom once again changed everything. we know that id Software was hyping up Doom whenever they got the chance with the most ridiculous allegations, and this is no exception. They said that Doom would be the leading problem in workplace productivity in the year 1994 after the game would come out. This is a joke. There is no possible way it did. They said this in early 1993, but it literally came true. Office buildings literally saw work servers being overloaded because workers were downloading Doom on work computers. And some of the individuals were losing productivity time because they were playing Doom at work. Once again, Doom changed everything. Doom created an entire genre of FPS games that until GoldenEye 007 would all be dubbed as Doom clones that recreated the game's 2.5D style. Doom changed everything. John Carmack created the binary space partitioning that was used in video games that helped run Doom and has been used in thousands of video games since that until present day. Doom changed everything. And I mean fuck, dude. We really want to talk about it? The downloads, the server crashes, the 2.5D game style, the technological breakthroughs, the deathmatch being created, the multiplayer, the modding community that quadrupled in the PC landscape after Doom's release, and its easy to use engine that would go on to be one of the most used of the 90s. The title of this video is correct. The workers of id Software had their conflicts, Tom Hall specifically, but all these guys put in the work. Romero with his level designing with Sandy Peterson, Tom Hall with a lot of the original designs for the creatures and a lot of the original designs for concepts and textures and walling that would get used from the Doom Bible. John Carmack created a legendary engine that revolutionized the gaming industry. Adrian, Kevin, and Gregor all making some of the most memorable creature designs ever put into a video game. They caught lightning in a bottle twice. And I can never understand that even after explaining all this. There is a million documentaries online that can go into further detail for you about the creation of Doom. But John Carmack, I will say, whenever he's done an interview, he seems to be the one that least understands what was going on outside of the curtain of his own game engine. He gets asked in interviews about cut content like cut guns, but he makes it seem like that no guns were ever cut from the game, which that's not true at all. They did cut guns. There was rifles that were cut. There were different weapons that were cut from the game. There were items that were cut from the game. So I don't know if he doesn't remember or if he focused too much on his game engine, but I would recommend going to John Romero's conversations on Doom. He goes into the pre-alpha conversations like what he does with the We Are Developers interview, which is where I got a lot of my early information from. And even Adrian Carmack or Kevin Cloud have interviews as well where they give some really great insight. They dive into all the removed assets like unholy Bibles, demonic artifacts that would be items or weapons that were removed eventually before the final product. These items would eventually become more prominent in id Software's Doom clone series called Heretic or Hexen with the sequels. These items aren't directly in those games, but it makes more sense for them to be in that environment because it feels more fantasy, whereas Doom is science fiction just with demons as a villain. It's a story created by id Software about one space marine who's on a mission to avenge his pet bunny who died because of these demons who were released through a portal on Mars. And by the end of Doom 1, he stops them on Mars, but they're on their way to swallow Earth. Now, before I can do any swallowing, I have to do some spitting. Let's talk about my review for Doom 1. Before getting into that, I want to talk about our sponsor for this video. I know what you're thinking. Ha! Look at that tiny subscriber count. You don't have a, well, you're right, I don't. I would love to keep making videos like these for all of you guys, not have to work a full-time job on the side. And so with your help in beating the shit out of the algorithm demon that holds me back, we can make it happen. Thank you for your support. Check out my Wolfenstein video, subscribe, like, and now let's get back to talking about my Doom review. Now, let's be honest. This isn't Shakespeare in terms of story. Some of this I didn't even know. Apparently, Doom Guy was arrested before the portal opens on Mars because he was arrested by a captain who commanded him to shoot a group of people, and while he was in prison, the portal opens and he escapes and has a battle through demons on Mars, and eventually when the demons want to go to Earth, they kill his pet bunny named Daisy. And by the way, to show you how much I love Doom, here's my pet bunny and her name is Daisy. The demons killed Daisy, and Doom Guy finally says, somebody is going to pay for killing my pet bunny Daisy. And that is how the first game wraps up. He shows up back on Earth and finds his bunny dead, and he wants vengeance. You're gonna get all the revenge you want in Doom 2 on this demon army who is trying to destroy humanity, but most importantly, they killed your bunny. I can relate to this because if anybody hurt my little Daisy, I'd go Doom guy on them. Now, I love the simplicity of Doom, but I will say if anyone asked me when I was a kid, why are you doing what you're doing in this game? I would just say, well, you're killing demons on Mars because they're demons. This is the point where we can go back to Tom Hall's concept for a story where we can give him some shout out. Doom would not have benefited off of having a full-fledged story. I think we can all agree with that. But Tom Hall has made it clear that he never wanted to intrude on gameplay. He only wanted it to be there so players knew why they were doing what they were doing. Tom Hall talks about how there would have been these military conspiracies and how they would have had cutscenes to show you why Doom Guy is in the place that he is, which, funny enough, is kind of what they do in Doom 3. They took a much more cinematic approach in that game, explaining how there's evil characters behind this military corporation on Mars and how they were the ones who released these demons. But let's be honest, nobody plays Doom for the story. So, what about those demons that hop through the portal and try and tear you apart limb by limb, and they're trying to rip and tear, but you're gonna rip and tear until the deed is done? How are those demons? Well, we get a lot of enemy variety. We got hit scan standard zombie soldiers, flying enemies like Caco demons and flying skull guys. I absolutely hate these guys. Projectile enemies like imps, mini bosses like the Baron of Hells. There is a lot here, and I would like to note a few things. First of which is giving credit to the creation of the Baron of Hell through Adrian Carmack, and the Imp was created by Kevin Cloud and Gregor, who created the Spider Mastermind. Now, what's the next thing to note? Let's talk about the creatures in this game compared to the enemies in Wolfenstein. And Wolfenstein had enemies with some variety, but most of them just shot at you and they felt like the same character with a different skin. They were all hit scan as well, which is something extremely important about Doom. Doom is a very fast-paced game. Doom is an extremely fast-paced game. It flies by. You turn on auto run and you'll be flying down hallways, then catch yourself surrounded by 9 enemies that are all shooting at you simultaneously. This only works when most of the enemies are projectile-based weapons. You can dodge a fireball that an imp shoots at you. You can dodge the projectile that shot at you from Caco demons. And even though there is hit scan weapons that you cannot dodge from the zombie soldiers, the company did notice that because they make them the weakest enemies in the game. You enter a room with a ton of enemies, you take out the soldiers first, and that adds a layer of strategy to this fast-paced gameplay, because if those guys shoot at you, you can almost guarantee it's going to hit you, whereas everyone else, you can dodge their attacks. This enhances that fast-paced gameplay because, hear me out, could you imagine if you entered that room as fast-paced as you do and you were surrounded by a bunch of enemies that all had hit scan weapons and they would instantly hit you rather than flying towards you like a projectile? Well, I'll tell you what would happen. The game would be broken and awful and you would die faster than what it takes to, say, rip and tear. These enemies shoot out mostly projectiles, so the game doesn't have to either A, give you way more health than needed, or B, make it slower by having less enemies. If you wonder why I love these two Doom games so much, it's because the dodging of these projectiles adds more to the pacing, because now it's another factor in your strategy when just racing through this game. Running down hallways, you have to factor in dodging everything on top of shooting back at them. The added layer not only makes the game feel faster, but it means that the difficulty of the game comes from the amount of enemies that are on your screen to see how many of their attacks you can dodge at the same time. And if you are skilled enough, you can dodge every single one of them and kill them all without being attacked. And that is why it is so goddamn entertaining. The projectile weapons, the flying enemies, the hit scan enemies being the weakest in the group that adds strategy to the gameplay, the speed of the game, the enemy variety, the awesome designs, and the difficulty that comes from the sheer amount of enemies on your screen. So many FPS games have tried to replicate this, and they try every single time. But when is the last time that you've seen a game where you open a room and there's just 20 enemies waiting for you there? All of this is why the enemies of Doom 1 are fucking amazing. Did I even mention that they fight each other? You can trick whole bosses to shoot a bullet at one of the other bosses in the room, and you can convince them both to fight each other in Doom 2 and Doom 1. You can have a whole room cleared out just from having one of the enemies shoot another enemy, and this aggroes them all onto each other, and then the room just becomes a giant Western saloon fight club with giant demons. Because why not? It's fun. No joke though, the enemy AI fighting each other was another crazy idea that was thrown into Doom's engine, and it had a massive payoff that even games to this day find it hard to replicate this. It should be in way more games. I don't know why more games don't have an enemy hit another enemy and then they both fight each other. That's hilarious. That's enjoyable to the player. All of this is why Doom's gameplay is so fucking fun, and we haven't even gotten to the environments. I could end this video here and just say Doom's perfect, bye. But I won't do that, because this game deserves the 10% of your brain that you use to just play it. This game deserves that 10% of your brain. So let's move on to environments. Doom added skyboxes, as we said earlier. It added to these insanely diverse environments, ranging from laboratories and these space stations to hell-looking landscapes, and they even added a far more interactive environment. Doors, teleporters, stairs, that added a whole new level of dimension, new lighting, floors that were made of acid, barrels that exploded, and so much more. This level of interactivity, especially with the acid floors and the barrels exploding, that added another layer of strategy, because if you see 4 enemies surrounding you that all have hit scan weapons and they're right next to a barrel, boom, shoot the barrel and it just wipes them all out. Bravo, Doom. Bravo. There's a key system where you cannot unlock certain doors without a colored key that is coded to a specific door. This meant that you'd explore entire levels to figure out where these keys were before progressing to the next level. This could sound like it had a lot of backtracking, but you rarely ever backtrack in Doom. And even when you did, you moved so fast that you could get from one end to the level in less than a minute. Especially because this game doesn't really feel like a maze, unlike Wolfenstein 3D. I say doesn't really because some of the missions have a slight mazy feel to them, but that's really only if you're not used to Doom yet. Most of the levels are open landscapes. They are open sandbox feeling missions. It is a sandbox-esque game where you can feel like you can explore every crevice. It has a big playground of areas to explore where you can fight tons of enemies, and it doesn't ever really feel like I'm just walking down an endless stream of copy and paste hallways. These playgrounds become even more entertaining when bosses that you previously fought at the end of an episode become mini bosses scattered throughout the game. The Baron of Hell, these awesome looking guys, start off as the final boss in episode 1 of Doom 1, but they quickly become common as an enemy that you see out in the open with everyone else. After killing these opponents, after collecting a key, after opening a new door, you could always quick save. Now, quick saving is not a new feature. I want to point that out right now. This was in Wolfenstein 3D, and the credit should be given to that game. I still think it is noteworthy though to bring up, because you never needed to pause your game for anyone, not even your mom, who was kicking down your door trying to get you to go to Sunday school at church. I vividly remember trying to convince my mom to not take me to church because I was killing demons, and that is what God would want me to do. I was being God's mightiest soldier as Doom guy. That church was going to hold me back on my true quest that God would want me to do, which was killing all the demons in Doom 1 and Doom 2. Another thing that Wolfenstein 3D did was give Doom that wonderful UI that was always meant to have Doom guy's face in the middle that got injured with every punch he took, every hit he took from a bullet. This helps the game develop a charm when you're at 2% health and your character looks like the creature on the front cover of Doom 3. I mean, come on, they look exactly the same. They look identical. It's actually kind of interesting because I really don't know why they stuck with the same UI as Wolfenstein 3D, considering that they were really trying to depart from that style of game. So it was always kind of surprising to me, because all the other aesthetics and the atmosphere that is emphasized in this game is completely different from Wolfenstein 3D. There's dead people everywhere that make you hate the demons more and more as you go through the hallways. There is disturbing imagery that looks like it would be on the front cover of Led Zeppelin or Judas Priest's album. There's death animations like the Caco demon that make me smile every time I kill one with his eyes popping out of his sockets. It's so great. We got multiple different guns that all use different ammo types, secrets on the map that are well hidden enough to where if you are searching, you will probably be able to find them without just randomly clicking on every wall you see. Like if the lighting looks a little weird on a wall, if there's 2 torches on the left and right of a wall space, if there's armor pickups all lined up to create an arrow pointing to a secret, you know it's a secret. So therefore, you didn't have to just run around randomly clicking on everything like in a lot of other games prior to this. Instead, you just saw this and it was very obvious it was a secret. All these extra layers are what make the game more replayable and reward exploration of these massive sandbox maps. The levels feel like they each have their own little gimmicks, with some teleporter plazas filled with teleporters, others with hordes of enemies being the focus, and others were making you feel as OP as possible with tons of insane weapons was the focus. Some missions focused on introducing the wacky special abilities like tons of health pickups, the Berserker health pack, which gives you 100% health, but also makes your punches super powerful. You can explode enemies in one punch. Or, in the greatest of all scenarios, the mission surrounds itself around that beautiful BFG, which stands for Big Fucking Gun. And if you are still not convinced that Doom is one of the greatest and most important video games ever created, then let me introduce you to Bobby Prince. Bobby Prince created most of the iconic soundtrack that was inspired off of heavy metal in a techno combination. Bands like Megadeth, Alice in Chains, and Metallica, and many more were some of the main inspirations. You combine that with the enemy variety, the dodging while shooting, the fast-paced gameplay, the revolutionary technological leaps, the 2.5D environments, all the different weapons, the sandbox, the pace, the interactable environments, and drop that needle when you throw this banger on top of all of it, you got yourself the closest a game is ever going to get to a 10 out of 10. Now, you may notice something with my tone, in my demeanor when I talk about this game. You may notice something. Yes, I have nostalgia for this game. Way to go, you figured it out. I think nostalgia can create rose-tinted glasses that cause many people to not recognize a game for what it is. But you all know that I am the first person to tell you if a game feels extremely outdated or was possibly extremely influential but doesn't stand as tall as it used to. If I lined up every first-person shooter ever made, Doom stands tall above most of them, even to modern-day standards. And I have friends who have never played Doom until just this past couple of years who would agree with me. They don't have any nostalgia, but they would agree with that. This is genuinely a fantastic game. It's one of the most fast-paced games ever made if you got auto run on, which I would call sweaty mode, to be honest, and it deserves your attention. It doesn't matter if you're playing the game on a toaster, a pregnancy test, on a calculator on your fucking PS5. It's everywhere and you have no reason to skip out on it unless it's like a personal vendetta against Doom. But let's be real. I'm gonna interrogate you for a second. I'm pulling out the interrogation lamp. I'm pointing that shit in your face. I'm gonna come bad cop really quickly here. What personal reason do you got not to kill demons? Unless you are one. Doom is hard for me to review because I love it. I can't help but get a smile on my face when I see Doom Guy's ridiculous outfit that's missing his core just to show off his abs. I can't help but smile when seeing a Caco demon's eyes fall out. I can't help any of that, but I've come to realize that as I've gotten older, the games I've grown up with, games I am super nostalgic for like Battlefront 2, the Godfather video game, Tony Hawk Underground, or whatever else in between, those games aren't perfect, and I realize that as I get older. I don't live in a naive bubble to believe that they are just perfect. But Doom is the only game I think in my whole life that has nostalgic meaning to me, but when I play it as an adult, it still feels perfect. And as fast-paced as it was 20 years ago, it never has once slowed down for me. I have played so many first-person shooters. I have played a countless number of first-person shooters, probably the genre I've played the most of. And I would say that Doom has never once slowed down for me. You can play the main episodes, the community mod content, the multiplayer or deathmatch, whatever you want, and it still feels perfect. But I want to play devil's advocate for a minute. What if Doom felt like it was an old, crappy, outdated game? Does it feel outdated? I mean, yeah, you can't look up or down in the game. That's an obvious thing that would feel outdated to somebody. The game has an auto-aim system that assumes that you are trying to shoot at something based on where you're looking at, and it can be a little wonky sometimes. I will challenge anyone, though, that's watching this video to play a game from 1993 that doesn't have auto-aim, and I can guarantee you it feels 10 times wonkier than Doom's auto-aim system. Doom had this auto-aim for a purpose. It was hard enough to get used to the verticality with the walls and the changing heights of where the enemies were at, and so they simplified it all down by looking left and right to shoot and not up and down. Sure, sometimes the auto aim hits something you don't want it to hit, but it's like a black and white movie. I challenge anyone who is watching this that if you have not played Doom and it's because it's old and you can't look up and down or whatever your reasoning is, play through the first episode and then tell me whether or not if you even notice it anymore. Black and white movies are something that people just dismiss because they're black and white. Yet most people get over it and they don't even notice it after watching the film for the first 20 minutes. I make that challenge to you with Doom. Now, is there anything else that feels outdated? I would be lying if I didn't say the game gets a little bit too save scuffy and a little bit too difficult in the final episode, and you feel the need to just save a lot in that final episode.
Also, the game has a lot of problems with its difficulty when you get into nightmare mode, and that's because a lot of older games, they would make their hard difficulties extraordinarily hard, and even John Romero has said that he cannot beat the game on nightmare mode. He can't even get past level 3.
Here's the bottom line. In terms of video games, Doom is as ancient as the Baron of Hell. It's older than I am as a person, but Pac-Man is also old, and I wouldn't say Pac-Man feels outdated. Doom is still to this day one of the most fast-paced shooters to ever exist, and it can be played by everyone due to how accessible it is and how it's been ported to absolutely everything. It's literally one of the greatest video games ever created. But I'm going to change my mind last second here and say I fucking hate the game because the flying skull enemies suck. I hate those guys. The flying skull enemies, oh my gosh, if I could change one thing without wanting to freaking punch my monitor when I'm fighting is when I die from a skull guy because they come out of nowhere and there's like 7 of them. I hate those dudes. Hate them. I would never play this heaping pile of garbage ever again. Time to play the fastest paced FPS game ever created with Haze. The PS3 exclusive, that's actually where we're going now. We're going to start talking about Haze, the PlayStation 3 exclusive that topped Halo on the sales charts. Totally did. Don't even bother looking it up. Don't fact check me. And I promise, don't fact check me. I'm right, I promise. And it won the hearts of everyone in the world. Haze is honestly better than Doom in every conceivable way. It's almost as good as my favorite FPS game ever made called Brink. My review for Wolfenstein was that it's a cool ass game. Doom's review is a little bit more complicated than that because it is one of the best games ever made, and it has lived on in every possible way through its aftermath, from its release to the legacy that it created through dozens of Doom clones in the 90s, the 2.5D engine, the binary space partitioning, paving the way for arena shooters down the line with Quake. We'll get into that in the future. Game modding being popularized through community-made levels, deathmatch being created, the revolutionary technology, the iconic imagery, the iconic music, and being installed more times than Windows 95 in the year 1995. That's why it happened. It's not a mystery. It's not like it was just a fad. It's the closest to perfect that maybe a game has ever been in all of the 90s and in some people's entire lives. Now, even for a game that was as close to perfect as we can get, that doesn't mean its aftermath was pretty. It wasn't. It may have gained popularity, but with that came the popularity of the media. The day before Doom came out, literally the day before, December 9th, there was a hearing between American senators regarding violence in video gaming. They were talking about Mortal Kombat, which is kind of the godfather of video game violence, but that's another video entirely. Doom was never brought up in these conversations. It was actually never brought up in any of the video game hearings ever, but it was brought up regarding the Columbine shooting. The shooters described the idea of shooting people as like playing Doom, and they were known for having wads of a Doom map they custom made of their school campus, which this is all awful, but it is a myth that they would practice shooting on that map of their school in the first place. That is a myth. That's not actually true. This is a tragic event, and that's how it should be treated. It should be focused on the mental health of it. It should be focused on literally how the school can recover after that. And the type of conversation that you don't want to have regarding that is just about video games, because playing video games as a pastime is something that literally so many people do, and it's like anything else. I won't linger on this. There's countless videos about the topic, but it's just terrible that this happened in the first place. This is a part of the Doom aftermath. This is a part of all of that. And that was one of the reasons why it was in the media spotlight, because they didn't want to talk about just mental health or identifying problems with children early in development, but instead focused on drifting into just video game territory, which I'm sorry, but that is so fucking stupid. Going back to the video game violence topic, Doom would become synonymous with other video games like Mortal Kombat for being just a gore fest that would make your child into a violent monster. This would be the unfortunate aftermath of Doom's release, and it would become one of the saddest moments, the saddest moment in its entire legacy. Another major talking point, which can be seen as a negative or a positive in Doom's history, depending on the way you want to view this, is that some of the song tracks that were made by Bobby Prince weren't intended to be used in the game because they were so similar to other rock artists like Megadeth's music. For example, one of the extremely popular tracks called At Doom's Gate, a classic. It's one of the most iconic sounding, probably the most iconic sounding song from Doom's soundtrack, is literally just a combination of No Remorse by Metallica and Hooked by DRI. Legit, just listen to the openings alone. Now, this is At Doom's Gate. This is No Remorse by Metallica. And then this is Hooked by DRI. There are plenty more songs that were used in the game that are like this, that have this problem of just being direct copy and paste from other metal music. And I love Bobby Prince's soundtrack, and I don't think these songs were meant to be necessarily used, which is in his own words. And he's made plenty of other bangers that aren't just ripoffs, but even he has been surprised that they were never sued for this. He was very surprised that they were never sued for this. That is the positive, if you want to look at it that way. id Software was never sued, but they sure were smashing thin ice with a fucking hammer when taking these obvious ripoffs at the time and hoping they would not get sued. It's hard to respect the creative integrity of this music when there is multiple examples on these soundtracks of them just taking direct things from other songs. And even though I love this soundtrack, this behavior does still need to be called out, whether intentional or not, because Bobby Prince didn't think all these songs were going to be there. But even if it was unintentional, it still happened. He was also responsible for the sound effects of the game though, and that is mostly just animal sounds that were slightly distorted, with my favorite being the arachnometron, I think that's how you pronounce that. Yeah, that's totally, acronometron. Bro, listen to this death sound effect. That shit makes me smile. Bobby has still proven that he is a fantastic composer and that he's done some great things for the sound effects, but let's talk about everything Doom has done for, well, everyone as we wrap up this video. They inspired Doom clone after Doom clone, and if I was going to go through all of them, then I'd be here all day. Here's just a few of a long list of my favorites: Star Wars Dark Forces, Shadow Warrior, Redneck Rampage, Eradicator. And if you're looking for a new company that's not just a 90s Doom clone, if you're looking for a brand new company, an indie company that still makes games the way Doom used to, look no further than New Blood Interactive. This company made Avid Evil, Dusk, and one of the best FPS games I've played in a while with Ultra Kill. id Software still makes fantastic Doom games as well, but if you're looking for anything else, New Blood has found a way to take the speed of an old Doom and add modern mechanics that only make it feel faster and faster and faster. They have found a way to take the dodge and shoot gameplay and have me flying across arenas during the battle, making for one of the most chaotically entertaining shooters to come out in years. With all three of these games, by the way, not just one of them, but Ultra Kill is my personal favorite. New Blood Interactive is a studio that I will get just as excited about one of their upcoming releases as an id Software release, and for an indie studio, let's be honest, that's phenomenal work. I can tell you all these Doom clones all the live long day, but all I know is that what the fuck are you doing still watching this video? Go play this game, because they weren't out to make money, they were out to make history. And going off of that quote, guess what? They did. The History of FPS series will continue with our first video being Wolfenstein 3D, second video being Doom, and what do you think the next game will be? Do you have any games that you think are worth talking about? Or a Doom clone that you personally love to play? Or what have you been playing recently? Tell me, let me know.
And if you want to hear my thoughts on Doom 3, then join me on my podcast with my best friend named Josh. We talk about multiple different video games every single 2 weeks, and this episode was for Doom 3. We dig into the horror of Doom 3, our personal thoughts on it, our personal thoughts on the rest of the franchise, and how I was prevented from playing this game as a kid. It's called Library of Video Games, and the link will be down in the description below.
Thank you, appreciators, for watching. This has been Appreciation Culture. You should subscribe, like, and become a true appreciator, because why miss out when you know we are going to be appreciating every single little piece of art out there? And I'll see you there.
Halo 1's my favorite Halo.
Okay.
I love Halo 1.
Halo 3 is my favorite.
Halo 3 is goated. I love Halo 3. I love all three of them.
Yeah.
All those first three. Do you skip the Doom cutscenes?
No, I didn't.
Well, Doom 3, you can't skip the cutscenes.
Okay, well I didn't try. Well, do I
okay.
skip them on like not?
I skip them in Doom Eternal.
Not my first playthrough. No, I always want to.
Oh, okay.
I don't usually don't skip cutscenes in general.